Well, let's get started. Hello and welcome to Heavy Use Area Protection presentation. My name is Joe and I've been at the Skagit Conservation District over 20 years and have been a farm planner in the past, but my main focus of work recently is on riparian restoration. We have a lot of people on the Zoom today, so we're going to ask that if you have any questions to type them in the chat box and we will try to answer them after the presentation. Jeff Frazier will be our main presenter today. Jeff?
Hello, thank you for attending. My name is Jeff Frazier. I've been at the district for a little more than 8 years. I help with working with small farms, large farms, and dairies on planning and nutrient management. I enjoy what I do and the services that the Conservation District provides. In this PowerPoint, we'll give you a brief overview of heavy use area protection. Everyone on here has different animals and different needs. We have tried to give an overall approach to give you a broad view of some of the main components of a heavy use area that could be applied. Let's get started. Why manage mud? Let's be honest, there is no best management practice that can eliminate mud completely. All we really can do is try to apply best management practices by knowing what all inputs that are contributing to make the mud and manage accordingly. Hopefully this PowerPoint will help with your mud management. Muddy conditions can make chores more difficult and expose livestock to animal health risks that often bring higher feed and veterinarian bills. Mud is also damaging to the environment. Runoff from sediment contaminates surface water and is detrimental to water quality, fish, and aquatic wildlife. Mud harbors bacteria, fungal organisms, and other pathogens that cause livestock diseases such as abscesses, scratches, rain scald, or thrush. And I'm sure there's more. Next slide, please. Heavy use area protection. Heavy use area, or an acronym that's used a lot, is HUAP, is defined as used to stabilize a ground surface that is frequently and intensively used by people, animals, or vehicles. This practice applies to all land uses where a frequently or intensively used area requires treatment to address one or more resource concerns. What is a resource concern? A resource concern is defined as a condition of the soil, water, air, plant, animal, or energy resource base to an extent that sustainability or intended use of the resource is impaired. Heavy use area protection is sometimes referred to as confinement area or sacrifice area. The next few slides will define and give more information on that. Next slide, please. A confinement area. A confinement area is a gravel, concrete, or hog fuel area that is used to contain animals and keep them off pasture from late fall through early spring. An example would be October through March. During the rainy months, soils become soggy and easily compacted by the weight of livestock. This causes plant roots to suffocate and reduces the soil's capacity for holding water. Keeping livestock off pastures during the wet winter months will keep grass healthy and prevent mud. The pictures are 3 different confinement areas with 3 different top layer materials. You have sand, and then wood, chips, and grass. Next slide, please. Sacrifice area. Sacrifice area is a small enclosure such as corral, run, or pen, which is meant to be your animal's outdoor living quarters. It is called a sacrifice area because you are giving up the use of the small portion of land that you were previously grazing area for the benefit of the rest of your pastures. Animals should be confined to the sacrifice area during the rainy season and when your pastures become overgrazed. It is also useful for separating or confining animals to control the amount of grass consumed daily. Would Joe like to comment before moving to the next slide, or next slide? Sacrifice area continued. Keeping animals off saturated and rain-soaked pastures is critical during winter months in the Pacific Northwest, as pastures cannot survive continuous grazing and compaction. Horses can particularly be hard on pastures because the pounding of their hooves compacts the soil and suffocates plant roots. In addition, their hooves act like plungers by loosening fine particles of topsoil, which are then washed away by rain. Even cattle, sheep, and goats can compact the soil. Pigs can do significant damage to grass, other plants, and trees just by the nature of the way the animals forage. Next slide, please. Choosing the right location for a heavy use area. Careful considerations should be given to the location of the confinement area. It should be located on higher ground and away from wetlands or any surface water flows. Surface water flows like lakes, ponds, streams, rivers. For chore efficiency, it should be convenient to your barn, manure storage, and feeding area to make it easy for you to care for your animals and to maintain your sacrifice area. You may want to locate your sacrifice area so grassy strips, lawn, or pasture or other vegetation buffers surround it. Next slide, Joe. Choosing the right location continued. The vegetation in these buffer areas will act as a natural filtration system to reduce sediment and contaminants washed from the sacrifice area. The size of sacrifice area can vary from that of a generous box stall, such as a 20 by 20, to that of a long, narrow enclosure where animals can move about to get some exercise. The size and shape of the sacrifice area will depend on the types of animals needing to be confined and their temperament. The amount of land you have available and soil type will also have a bearing on the size as well. Any comments, Joe? Next slide. Fencing. Remember, the smaller the enclosure, the greater the chances of animals getting hurt or damaging the fence of the confinement area. Be sure to use the very safest fencing for your sacrifice area, with keeping in mind what animals you are keeping in confinement. Whatever type of fencing you choose, you want to reinforce it with some type of hot wire if your animals can tolerate that. Hot wire is just a suggestion. I know some landowners that have animals that don't like hot wires. In the picture examples, we have wood, steel, and some woven galvanized fencing. Next slide, please. Fencing continued. Gates on fences should be adequately sized for the types of equipment that need to access the area, such as trucks to deliver footing or feed, and tractors for maintaining the area. Be sure corners are safe and there are no protruding objects like bolt ends, nails, boards, or the tops of metal T-posts, which could hurt animals. Also, watch out for the corners of roofs and the bottom edges of metal buildings. There should be no wires or hanging cords, and absolutely no junk, garbage, or machinery in the sacrifice area. Next slide, please. Fooding materials. Fooding is an important consideration for the confinement or sacrifice area. I would add what kind of livestock you have will also help in considering different materials. Hog fuel or wood chips can provide an excellent surface and are good environmental control for a quick fix. It should be noted that if you don't create a way for water to fall through the heavy use area and run away, using hog fuel or wood chips will make a bigger job to clean up later on. Through the composting process, this footing can contribute to the breakdown of the nitrogen in urine and manure. Other footing materials that could be used: gravel or sand for some situations. Whatever material is used is recommended to avoid feeding animals on these surfaces, as ingesting sand, rock, or hog fuel or mud with the hay may cause digestive problems, resulting in expensive vet bills. Trying a combination of footing types might also work well, such as using gravel in high traffic areas and hog fuel in the rest areas. Hog fuel on top of the sand or the pea gravel may also work well. Next slide. On this slide, I will have Joe discuss some footing materials.
This is just an example of a typical cross section of a heavy use area. There's basically 4 layers. And if you have a well-drained soil, you might not need this first layer of this 2-inch rock that we put down. And over that is your woven fabric that gets trenched in and tucked into the ground below your level that you're working at, so the corners don't peel up if the animals are digging there. So then on top of that woven fabric, you have a smaller crushed rock, like a 5/8 minus, that gets compacted. And then on top of that, you have 4 to 6 inches of coarse washed sand. And that allows the water, the rainwater, to drain down through this. But you have this woven barrier to keep your sand and your gravel mixing with the native soil.
So, and I would add, so the whole purpose is when you, like, one of the questions that comes up is, well, how far do I dig? Okay, well, it's almost like planning, like you're building. Whenever builders build, they're going to dig down to hard pan, so that you build this up. So theoretically, the water is going to wash down to the hard pan where it's really hard, and then wash away, and then not be there to create mud. That's all I got. Next. So on this slide, we're going to talk about the different products. Hog fuel is an organic material that will break down over time. Every 2 to 3 years, it will need to be removed and replaced with the new material. Both the hog fuel and the roof runoff system reduce mud. Up in the that picture up on the top. Mud management is an important aspect for the health of your livestock and the health of the environment, as well as for your convenience. Animals standing in mud for long periods of time can develop fungal and bacterial problems. Footing such as 3/8 or 5/8 hog fuel and sand can be used to help confinement areas stay dry. Different site preparations and footing materials are appropriate for different soils and types of livestock. Any comment, Joe? Next slide. In the picture to the left, the landowner was getting frustrated with all the mud and water. After learning about the heavy use area's designing purposes, the landowner chose to make a change. The picture to the right is of the landowner's finished product. In this example, the landowner extended out a row of rubber mats and then top finished with fine rock and leveled it up to the mats. Next slide. Keep it clean. Use of a sacrifice area confines manure and urine to a smaller area where you can manage it better. Picking up the manure every day to every couple of days will help reduce your animal's parasite load, as well as reducing habitat for flies. This will also help prevent runoff from becoming contaminated with manure. Manure can be composted and applied to your pastures in the dry months. Composting of manure is recommended to prevent parasite reinfestation. It is advised to put a tarp over your manure pile if not covered, so that it'll compost a lot better if it can be somewhat dry. Next slide, please. Keeping it clean continued. Cleaning manure in the confinement areas every 1 to 3 days. is the simplest and most important things you can do to prevent mud. Most livestock manure contains 70 to 80% moisture. If manure is left to be trampled on by livestock, it will quickly turn into mud. Cleaning manure from the confinement area is also important for preventing parasite reinfestation. Next slide. Go ahead, Joe.
So coarse wash sand is the best choice for livestock with small manure pellets. Coarse wash sand will drain better than fine sand. Then the manure pellets can be raked up into a pile and then shoveled up and transported to your manure storage. Again, we say it all the time, your sacrifice area will last longer, or your heavy use area will last longer if you clean it daily. Manure is the enemy. It mixes with the sand and the gravel, and then it starts turning to mud. So we can't stress that enough.
Excellent. All right, next slide. Reap the rewards. Once your sacrifice area is ready, the way to integrate it into your pasture management program is to take your animals off the pasture when the majority of the grass is grazed down to 3 inches or less, or to 3 inches. You try not to want it to be less, then that affects the grass. Or when pastures are saturated and rain soaked. Healthier pastures mean more productivity, which means less money spent on supplement feed. This will have an added benefit of making your animals and your neighbors happier. Next slide. And that is, thank you. That's all. That's the end of it.
Okay, Jeff, we've got some questions in the chat. The first one is what is hog fuel? Can you explain what hog fuel is?
Okay, that's a good one. Hog fuel, wouldn't you say that it's almost like a byproduct of the, when they are going to make chips, or it's more of a it's a wood product. It's usually all the stuff that if they do
I know
I don't
when
know. That's good.
when Bell Pole was in business down in Stanwood, they used to sell hog fuel, and basically it was the bark from the outside of the logs that was all shredded up that they had. So yeah, I think it's just shredded up wood product. Today it probably could be things from those big tub grinders.
Right. And it has been hard to find. So sometimes, and it's worth checking it out before you just call and ask, because I've seen where there's been they were calling it hog fuel, but when it showed up, I mean, they were calling it hog fuel, and we just had 2 different interpretations of hog fuel, and it was really, really woody, and it didn't have like it's kind of spongy. A really good hog fuel is kind of got properties to absorb water. I mean, it's more of a,
Yeah,
it's hard to explain.
It's like fibrous bark material when you pull it apart, almost like coconut husk or something.
Right.
Okay, so the next question is can you top with fresh hog fuel, or should it be completely replaced? I guess that depends.
I got to hear what was that one, because I was reading the chat and I wasn't listening.
They ask, can you top with fresh hog fuel, or should it be completely replaced? And I guess my response to that would be, how messy is the top of the hog fuel, and how far down has the urine and the manure soaked into the hog fuel? I mean, if they're walking around and it's muddy, yeah, then it probably needs to be replaced.
Right. If it's muddy again and you've already put hog fuel in, then yeah, that's I mean, you could put more hog fuel on it. It's just at some point in time, it's going to be a major clean out versus that's going to be a lot of material, and then that would take a while to compost longer, the thicker it is. So that's the problem that creates.
Okay, the next question. I have a sacrifice area built to these specs with 5/8 minus gravel. I find organic matter manure over time clog the drainage of the footing. How do you maintain the area without having to scrape off the footing and replace every year or two? How to maintain? There again, that's, you need to pick up your manure daily. Maybe you're getting extra organic matter in there from the animals traveling from a muddy area up onto the gravel and dragging, soil with them when they come. But yeah, it's yearly maintenance to take care of those, as far as replacing gravel. But like I said, most importantly, pick up manure daily.
Yeah. I wonder if the 5/8 minus, with it having the minus in it, if clean rock wouldn't be better, so then it could, anyway, I don't know. Without seeing it, you can contact us. We'd for surely check it out.
Okay, next question. And I don't know this one. Can you use hog fuel with fiber animals like sheep? I don't know if that'd be a good idea.
I don't know that. I don't know.
Like we said in the presentation, the best heavy use area for sheep and goats is the fabric gravel sand scenario. Next question. When it rains, the cow manure is very difficult to remove completely from the gravel. Suggestions?
Okay. Okay. When cattle it's kind of in its own category because of the way that they, basically just stand there and eat and go to the bathroom right there. They don't move around. So a lot of times a person will have a feeding area and then have that be concrete so they can just scrape it, because they seem to go to the bathroom a lot too. So there's always a lot of it, but I don't know any ways to get it to get it out of the gravel better. It's just a matter about changing that surface and changing your practice a little bit, so that if it was concrete or a hard surface, then you could scrape it and move it that way. So I don't know if that helps answer the question, but
Okay, and these are not questions, but just some comments people made. Hog fuel is the wood chips that are used in lumber mills to fuel the hog or wood drying kiln. Somebody also says have to be careful about getting grindings. They got some material that had nails and metal in it.
yep.
Oh, here we go. Can you speak to how this can scale for larger herds? I have 150 sheep, so manually shoveling manure pellets daily, weekly is not feasible. Plus a percentage of hay from feeders ends up on the ground every day too. Are there designs that can be managed more like with a loader moving material 1 to 2 times per year? I think if you've got that many sheep, you're probably looking at a situation where you would have to have like a covered sacrifice area, with a barn roof or a dome or something. I mean, like one of those polydome thingies, and have what they call like a dry pack where you're hauling in sawdust or shavings. And then when that gets wet and dirty, put a new layer on top of that. And then, once or twice a year, you're cleaning the whole thing out. Jeff?
Yep. I would, there's a lot of variables. I mean, we can help, a lot of it is how much manure, that's the one way we look at it is we figure out, we have this systematic through NRCS, a way to figure out, in inputs and outputs. So then you can figure out how much manure you have, daily, monthly. And then when you get to those numbers, then you manage accordingly. Then we look at different scenarios to what's the best way to do that efficiently. And so that's all it's just be more of a look at. But what you said is correct, Joe, about the those bedding pack areas are good for when you're going to have a place that it's going to pile up, and then you only have to do that once or twice a year. Otherwise, it's a lot of these managements are labor intensive.
Okay, next question. Can drainage ditches help? What's the difference between woven fabric and non-woven fabric? You want to be careful with drainage ditches because drainage ditches have to drain somewhere, correct? So you might be introducing fecal coliforms or other things into a water body where it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Let's see. What's the difference between, I don't know, what woven fabric and non-woven fabric?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the tensile strength. And I was trying to find a link to the Natural Resources Conservation Services materials spec sheet.
Right.
It's material specification 209, and it lists what the fabric needs to weigh per ounce and what the tensile strength is and things like that. Is the material of those 1-ton grain sacks similar to the geotextile fabric? Might be a good way to reuse those sacks if it'd work for that purpose. I don't know. I'm not familiar with them. The only thing about using individual sacks to line your sacrifice area is you would have to have quite a bit of overlap and make sure you're overlapping in the right direction. If there's any slope, you want it to run down like on a roof, like you do shingles on a roof. So that'd be pretty labor intensive and quite the puzzle to put together.
Yes, and also that sounds really good in theory, but the animals, if you had it thick enough that they couldn't get to it, because once, I don't know. Anyway, that would be interesting. It would just have to be thick, and yeah, you would have to displace it. But that would be interesting to see the results of it. Okay, next one.
I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm just seeing people making comments, kind of answering other people's questions. So if we have any more questions, we can put them in the chat. We still have plenty of time.
Is there a guide? Well,
yeah, is there a guide for how many square feet per animal to use in the heavy use area?
does NRCS have?
I've always left that kind of up to the landowner. There probably are some general guidelines, but every animal is different and has different personalities. One of these I designed with a landowner who had rescue animals. Some of the animals that he had were pretty small areas, and then other ones were quite a bit bigger because the animal is very spirited. So it kind of just depends on what works for the landowner and the personalities of their animals. I put a link in the chat for the material specification for the fabric. Does anyone know where to get crushed limestone, or is it similar to coarse sand? I don't think crushed limestone would be similar to coarse sand. Do you?
No, I don't know. I don't know at all. I'm not even gonna guess. I'm gonna write that down though, that question.
And here's a question that would probably require a site visit or at least a lot more information to know what exactly is going on. My sacrifice area is sloped and dirt and mud now at the bottom. What would you recommend? Some gravel at the bottom? It's hard to say without seeing the situation.
Yeah, seeing the situation and just knowing kind of what management practices are in place right now to, I mean, it, yeah.
Like what's the soil type there? Is it what's the hydrology doing? How's the water flowing?
How long are they in this area?
Right. How many animals are there? Next question is, do you have any suggestions for something to do right now versus mud? It's been much wetter this winter than normal.
Well, the only thing right now that is the hog fuel or some kind of thicker, more absorbent that's going to go right into the mud and absorb what's there, and then you'll have a little bit left on top depending on how thick you go. But just knowing, I mean, I've lived on a farm for basically my whole life, and when I was younger, that's when you do that, it's just a huge cleanup when you go to try to, let's say you want to make it right next summer. Well, you go do that, but it will help the situation now, but you're going to have to dig that out plus the other soil that was there, the existing soil. So it's just a matter of, if you know what's going to happen and you choose to do it, then that's a route to go. And it has been much wetter this winter.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. So there was a follow-up about the sacrifice area that is sloped with mud at the bottom that asked about adding some gravel. Yeah, that's a tough one. It's clay soil. There are 11 sheep in there daily when not bedding in the barn. It's approximately 60 by 75 area.
Okay, hold on. I want to back up to this other one though. It says, because I'm curious about this. There are legal requirements for an animal spacing. So what do they mean by legal? Legal requirements as in through the county code, or I'm just trying to understand. But yeah, check with NRCS or an extension for best management practices. But I'm just curious about the legal requirement, I guess.
Anyway. And the last one that I read about the 11 sheep and their daily, yeah, that's like Jeff said, maybe temporarily hog fuel or shavings or something like that could work. But it's really something that you should have somebody from your local conservation district come out and take a look at.
Okay, requirements or recommendations? Anyway. Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is that there's a requirement for the animal or a legalistic, because I get what you're, okay. Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's just the specifications for the fabric.
Okay. Okay. I see now. Thank you, Susan.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. If people still have questions, please type them in there and we can answer them or try to answer them.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about, the question didn't come up, but I thought it would. About where you can find that type of fabric.
Well, it really depends on the size of the job, because if you go to, it's not what HP Jagger, that's not there anymore, but it's called Ionics. I think they sell it like it's a road fabric almost. But you can only get it in 300, 300 square feet, like 15 feet wide, 300 feet long. I mean, that's that's a lot of fabric. And so that makes it rough if you don't have a big project. So the other places are Skagit Farmers. I mean, any of our, I think that they sell it there. I know Home Depot, they sell, it's a heavier grade, but they also have landscaping, and you don't want to get that because they'll just step through that.
Somebody posted a question here. How big does a dry well need to be? Well, it's
an engineering question.
Yeah, it depends on your soil type, how well your soil drains, and how much water you're inputting into it.
Right. But it's all, I mean, we can try to help too with that, with those kind of questions. If you contact us, I mean, some of our the cost share, or with a farm plan, we can come up with some drawings and to give you an example, or give you something to go with, so you can see what the process is.
And somebody asked, what is a dry well? Usually it's an area underground that you've excavated and put in gravel or coarser material, and then you're diverting like roof water, gutter water, or something to that area because you have nowhere else to go with it.
And usually the soil type is a certain kind so that it disperses once it goes there. So, once it's holding, it's kind of like a septic. I mean, is what it is, but without, it's just for what regular water. Well, if you look at the last page on the, if you still have, there you go. Or Skagit. So I don't want to talk anymore.
Hey, I'm not seeing any new questions. Still lots of people hanging on. So maybe they're thinking up some more questions. Next question. I notice a lot of water running along the clay layer when I dig some ditches to help with standing water. Is there anything to fix or direct the water? Yeah, clay, that's like a natural barrier for water. It's almost like having, if you have a clay lined ditch, it's like having a plastic lined ditch. Water does not move through clay very well. So the same person asked about the clay, should the water be directed to a dry well? It depends.
Well,
It depends on your soil type. If you're like, say, up on Bow Hill, I'm not sure where you're located, but anywhere where you have that hard pan soil where you got 12 inches of topsoil and then you got a clay layer, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You'd have to excavate out, a large area and bring in a lot of gravel and material to be able to hold the water. That clay soil is a tough soil to farm on.
But we're also answering questions without seeing and knowing really that not knowing what your soil type is, where it's located. Because there are solutions out there. So
So do we have any more questions? To come out and look, just contact. You can email at skagitcd@skagitcd.org, or you can reach out to Emmett or Jeff. There are two primary farm planners. Their information's up here on the slide, this last slide.
and then we can schedule something. After you get a hold of us, we'll schedule something, or we can talk on the phone and look at maps. There's a couple options.
Okay, we still have some people hanging on, and if anybody has any more questions, go ahead and type them in the chat.
Have you been into any other classes? All right, look forward to it.
If anybody has any more questions, please ask them. If not, feel free to jump in on another class.
What was our allotted time?
I think an hour. There's just a handful of people left now. Like I said, if one last question, or
It must be just.
maybe they just turned us off.
I definitely would have if I was on that end.